Welcome. So we're very fortunate today to have two extraordinary entrepreneurs, in their own words, two mavericks with us today. Larry Melton, who had some really interesting experiences, which we'll get into as facilities manager of the White House. Even during the unfortunate days of 9/11, his leadership was tested as he transformed their operations to deal with terror threats and technology adoption that were secure and reliable in an age of rapid innovation. After only 5 years, Larry was promoted to a senior executive role where he was responsible for more than 350 million square feet of federal real estate for the General Service Administration's Public Building Service National Headquarters, which, if you don't know better, is a lot. So during this period, Melton assembled an innovative and experienced leadership team to implement the largest smart buildings program in the country and a nationally integrated work management system to create one of the largest and most advanced real estate portfolios in the world. As he looked to the future, Larry's vision was to step away from government service to create a company that can provide a total real estate and facility operations solution that delivers the integrated services he sought in the marketplace as a federal executive, but never could quite find. In 2013, The Building People was born as an idea to create a company that could integrate technology, buildings, and people to deliver the future of facilities. And now in its seventh year, is recognized as an industry standard providing total real estate services solution to the industry. And also for those of you in the class, he's been in the Inc. 5000, I believe, 3 years running, which is an extraordinary honor and a testament to you and your team, Larry. So welcome.
Thank you, Clay. Appreciate you having us and excited to be here.
We're also fortunate to have Mike Mosel with us today. He's co-founder and certified talent optimization consultant. And Mike has a really interesting business model. And I'm going a little bit off script here for you, Mike, but you have a really interesting business model right there. Is passionate about advising businesses in industries like construction, hospitality, manufacturing, and general contracting, whose growth opportunities are specifically related to people. So once again, trying to unlock the best in people to be productive both for themselves and for the company. He brings nearly 20 years of hands-on CEO experience, having owned, operated, and exited a number of business, so a serial entrepreneur in our midst. As a graduate of George Mason University, Mike has continued his learning by participating in CEO business owner peer groups and leadership development programs, and is active in his local business community through the Charleston Metro Chamber of Commerce. And of course, he's been playing golf and has quite a handicap, I can imagine. So I will never be playing Mike in golf anytime in the near future. So Mike, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Clay.
So both you gentlemen are fantastic entrepreneurs, really impressive and done some amazing things. Can you just kind of describe your backgrounds and how this led to your present positions? We'll start with you, Larry.
Yeah, no, Clay, you did a great job on my bio, and I appreciate the kind words. And I'll tell you, 24 years of federal service, and I'm a big fan of public service. I think, our young workforce is they're shying away from it now, and it's not the sexiest of recruitment actions right now when you see it in the marketplace. But I will tell you that the 24 years I spent growing up in government, and let's be real, right out of college, had an opportunity to grow up in intern leadership, management development programs, had incredible coaching and mentoring that really made me who I am today. And I know that one of the foundational questions we always get is, so how did you get here? And were you just a serial entrepreneur coming out of college and you just always have this MBA or business administration background where you just understood it? And the answer is unequivocally no. I had no business background whatsoever. Public relations background by trade, went into the federal service, got into facilities and real estate, loved it, followed my passion, and I just wanted to be really good at facilities. It led me to my career, as you mentioned, the White House and the assistant commissioner role. The ability to understand the business acumen of the business over those 24 years is what positioned me to be a strategic entrepreneur. I started paying attention to the details, from how costs were incurred, how the business acumen and business day-to-day decisions of business owners, building owners, occupiers, tenants, and the real estate business as a whole. I dug in deep. I wanted to figure every nook and cranny out, and I wanted to understand it to the nth degree. If I had not done that, I couldn't be strategic enough to create an offering. And that's really, I will say, was foundational to me being prepared to sell something that I brought credibility to. And I think, especially when you're selling back to the federal government in particular, or commercial industry, but I think it's absolutely relevant in the DC metro area. If you're going to sell back to the government, you better bring some credibility and leadership to your offering. You just can't be Joe Schmo coming off the street and say, hey, well, I'm going to sell facilities management services because I want to be in this business because I know it or I like it. You better know how to operate it and create value, because let's be real, especially outside the DC metro area, 450,000 federal employees, we're a dime a dozen. And how many of them can transform into federal employee, into the commercial world, be an entrepreneur, and then say, and I create value going back to the government, right? That's been the hardest part, but it positioned me extremely well. So that was foundational to really setting the foundation for the building people.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mike?
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate now in my current role with People Surge to help business leaders connect the dots between business strategy and people strategy. I particularly turn the clock back on my original experience when I was out of college. My first job, you'll be happy to know this, was making $7.50 an hour as a golf pro. I thought I wanted to be in the golf business as a club professional. I was in the PGA of America Golf Professional Training Program. I quickly figured out that I didn't want to make $26,000 a year for the rest of my life. Got into sales. From sales, transitioned into wireless infrastructure. Started a company to help all the major national carriers build out their cellular infrastructure. Started a company with just about 6 or 7 folks in a little garage in Southern California. Grew that up to about 110 employees and 20 million in revenue. Thought I was the big man on campus. Sold that business to a publicly traded company. And I was quickly reminded that I was just a rounding error on their $4 billion balance sheet, right? So after having spent a few years working for that publicly traded company, I transitioned into advising businesses, advising companies in the small to medium-sized marketplace, and quickly figured out that that's where my passion was. My passion was in enabling CEOs and business owners to bring their ideas to life, having been there. And now I'm fortunate to complement my experience of having been a CEO and business owner with some science and technology from the predictive index. So now I not only have, I'm selling my time, but I'm also selling software, delivering workshops and training programs, and it's incredibly fulfilling to get to do the work that I do for just any number of companies. Every day is a new day. Every business that I get to interact, it's a blast.
Yeah, and let's circle back to that, Mike, because I know, and I want to go back to Larry on this too, in terms of the experience factor. So you had probably unique experience going into the PGA golf, training program right there, first of all, and the discovery that you didn't want to do that. So this is basically out of college. You were obviously a very good golfer. I wouldn't doubt if you didn't play college golf, but you're a really good golfer. You did this cool stuff, but you said, no, I need to do something else. And then you quickly went from sales to starting your own company. Could you describe a little bit about that? Because that seems like a pretty short leap to you going straight into entrepreneurship. But could you tell us how that experience got you there?
Yeah. So, I would love to say that I had a plan. I truly didn't. I think in my late 20s, I was really trying to figure it all out. As I thought ahead when I was in the golf business, it really hit me in July of 1998 in Houston, Texas, when I saw guys in their late 50s and early 60s teaching class about golf and just talking about the stats and the income and the earning potential. So it was in that moment that I said, I want to take charge. I wanted to be the guy on the other side of the counter, right? I wanted to be the guy that was the member at that club. I wanted to be the guy that could build a family and have a lifestyle that I was in charge of creating. And when I think back to taking that first leap of leaving the sales business to start a wireless infrastructure, I would say surrounding myself with good people. As I think back, as I look back now doing the work, and I think about the team of people that I assembled, I was very fortunate, very blessed to have really good business partners. And as an entrepreneur, one of the really interesting dynamics that we'll all face is going into business with others. And we can talk about that a little later, but that's, I think finding the right group of people to go into business with was very important. And I've learned a lot of lessons down the line since my first business. I've started a number of other companies and have learned a lot of other lessons around some of the folks that I interacted with as business partners. So I wish I could say that I had a plan. I just knew that I think the most important thing that I was focusing in on was, how was I going to make money? How was I ultimately going to do something that I enjoyed doing? And I was really keen on managing cash flow and understanding the dynamics of just the flow of money, both on the customer side and also behind the scenes to operate our business.
Excellent. Very good. Because I was going to say, because you went from there all the way to what you're doing now in terms of counseling and mentoring and basically helping to unlock this talent
That's right.
be. So that's a pretty interesting point, how you went back to the founding team to your selection right there. Very good.
Yep, absolutely.
Larry, yeah, please.
That's a perfect question and perfect segue, because in full disclosure, Mike and I have known each other for 28 years. We're not strangers to each other. We're not two, wacky maverick entrepreneurs that crossed paths in the last 2 years. And I will say, Mike saw me growing up in the public sector. And a good example of, we talked about my experience, how it positioned me to bring credibility in the marketplace. And that's the one thing that I don't take for granted. My international, my national credibility as a facilities management executive in the smart building circles clearly gave me credibility, right? But I was not a visionary entrepreneur with some unbelievable widget in my pocket that said, oh, I've got the secret sauce. So when I left, in fact, leading up to my departure, I will say, and Mike and I have been friends a long time, Mike saw me on a personal level struggling with, I'm trapped in this government executive position, but I had this passion and desire early on in my career in the 2000s, I started in the federal government in 1994. By 2000, close to 30 years old, I said, oh my God, I know I don't want to do this the rest of my life. How do I get out of it? How am I going to get out of this? What am I doing? I'm stuck in this box. And I knew that my passion was elsewhere. The question is, when was the right time to make that happen? And, I had friends like Mike pushing me saying, Larry, you've got a vision, you've got energy, you've got passion. How do I turn that passion into entrepreneurship? And, there's always the right time, right? And for me, my epiphany was, not till my early 40s when I said, okay, enough was enough. I'd built some credibility, but I couldn't sit there and watch myself do this for the next 17 years. The question is, if not now, why not? Then never, right? So when I launched, I will say the best part of my experience and how it really presented my business strategy was early in the 2013 development of the Building People. I remember getting to the point where we had our first $1 million in revenue and mapping it all out on a whiteboard, and Mike coming over to my office, which was, this office here is a very large portion of the office I had when Mike came and saw me. I had a closet and I had to borrow a conference room so that I could write on somebody's whiteboard a strategy out. That's how small we were. It was me and a part-time consultant, and I had generated about $1 million in pipeline and revenue. And I started mapping it out how I was going to make money. And Mike said, Melton, you've got a strategy, you've got a vision, you're off to the races. What are you doing? And he gave me that personal coaching. He gave me that CEO a mentorship that I needed early on, that I didn't know what I didn't know. And you don't know what you don't know when you start up. And of course, if I knew then what I knew now, I always say I'd probably be too afraid to do where I am today. I'd probably be too chicken, right? But now, because I know now what I didn't know then, I kind of look back and say, why didn't I do it earlier? Timing's everything, right? But positioning it and surrounding yourself, and I love Mike's statement, you got to surround yourself with leaders and people that are going to help you. People do business with people they like. Best advice I ever got. And I will say that, the coaching, mentoring, and the support arms you get in business, you will rely on those friends and colleagues. And in this world, it is somewhat cutthroat. Everybody is trying to make a buck or a dime or something, but you need to be able to create value and understand what is the value of that partnership and relationships that you're bringing in at all times. So it's the benefit, yeah.
And Larry, I just want to say, Clay, I'll share two more points. One of the questions here was, how do you perceive risk compared to others? And I think a lot of that, doing the work I know now, I know I welcome risk. Larry and I, as Mavericks, we're using this Maverick term, which is an homage to our reference profiles in predictive index, but we love risk. We absolutely get energized and are enriched, enlivened by taking risks. I think the thing that I would say about risk is doing a little work to understand your relationship to risk, both naturally and behaviorally, and then also understanding what that means for your family, your personal life situation, knowing that a lot of times, if you're raising a family and you've got kids and you've got other priorities, it can be challenging to take a risk to start a business. I remember telling Larry, I said, the first thing you're going to have to do to start a business is quit your job. And I think that was a hard, maybe that was the slap in the face, right? Of you can't start a business when you have a job. And the one thing that I will caution around this notion of entrepreneurship is that we see a lot of people transition out of what they're doing for a company to go do it for themselves. And that's kind of an easy path to being an entrepreneur, so to speak. And I would just caution that for those folks that want to do that, that's an easy way, right? To, hey, I was working for my organization doing a service. I'm now going to branch out and do it on my own. I would just ask the folks that go down that route to really think about this distinction of doing more and having more people do what I do and building a company, having a vision for building an organization, because they're really two disparate paths to go down. And I think, the folks that just go down the path of I'm going to get paid directly from a vendor to do it and hire more people to do that same thing can find themselves almost working in a job that they own, so to speak, and not really charting the course for building a company. So I just wanted to share that notion as I was looking at some of the lists around perceiving risk and this thought of entrepreneurship and why entrepreneurship. And so.
That's good. Yeah. Go ahead, Larry.
No, well, I was just going to pile on because obviously that's the whole story of how you take risk to get the company started, right? Which is, that startup capital question is where do you start? How do you get the seed money and how do you figure out, look, the way I did it, a lot of people said I was a genius. Other people said I was absolutely insane. So you talk about risk. I didn't realize how much I enjoyed risk until I jumped into this situation, to be honest with you. And I would say, I remember Mike telling me, first thing, quit your job. And yeah, but you don't understand, Mike. I have a family to feed. I have bills to pay. I'm the breadwinner for my family, so I couldn't afford it. I couldn't put my family in that kind of situation. And the reality was everyone around me who cared about me said, look, you've got the vision. You've got the strategy. You just need to get one win. If you get one win or position yourself for that one win, you're off to the races. So if you're okay, Clay, I'll just jump right into the discussion around startup capital and how did that transform from risk to reward, right? Startup capital, what I did, because Mike did the nudge of, hey, Melton, quit your job. Okay, great. Walked in and I had quit my job. And my plan was I saved up all my annual and vacation leave for my company, for the agency I worked for, and I didn't touch it. And my plan was if I resigned, I'd be able to take all that annual leave, cash it in, and put that in the bank, and that'd be my emergency fund. So I said, that's my emergency fund, a whopping $10,000, Clay. $10,000 in my savings account for my family to live on just in case I failed. Meanwhile, I had a contract, and it was a very small $100,000 contract for 6 months work. I think it was about $150,000 for 6 months worth of work. That sounds like a lot of money, but I got news for you. With no guaranteed on the back end and nothing, I had 6 months runway. And by the way, I had to deliver on that project too. So I had 6 months to deliver, which was already a tough deadline to meet. And then I had to figure out, how do I turn that into savings revenue so I can build a pipeline and go get more wins in 6 months and still survive and make a living. And look, a lot of people say, well, $150,000 in 6 months is a lot of money. That's not a lot of money when you're in startup mode and you're saying, I need to invest in some support. I need to build a pipeline and to get tools, resources, and other things in place to build some infrastructure. Fortunately, it turned it into a very quick win. Our second win for the company was another $500,000 win for a year. So and then we were off to races, and we said, okay, now we can build some capital strategy and et cetera. And then, from there, we've done nothing but grow. But I will tell you, I don't know if I'd recommend people do it that way, but at the same time, my process of quitting my job, to Mike's point, putting that little bit of money in there and not spending a lot. And that's tough for entrepreneurs, especially when they're starting off. You see cash, you see dollars, and you say, oh, well, that's cash in the bank. That's my money. The reality is cash is king, and you'll learn really quickly you need to hang on to it, because there will be a day when customers don't pay you on time, and you're going to need that cash. And there's a whole nother story about getting lines of credit, securing capital, securing credit lines, and things like that for a business. You can't get that unless you have cash and you have additional revenue coming in. So that's probably another chapter of a class or book that we can talk about.
Yeah, everybody loves cash flow crunch. Actually, nobody loves cash flow crunch at all. But I do want to circle back on one thing with you, Larry. Yeah. So a lot of my students, they're going to be working in corporations. And so corporations, and I'm assuming the federal government's this way. This is me not having only tangentially touches with the federal government. But, they don't like failure. They don't like people who fail, and they remember people who fail, and it usually doesn't work out very well. So once again, that risk question, they lower that. They want you to have as low risk as possible, because they don't want you to fail inside, because then it's a stigma for your career inside the federal government at that point, I'm guessing.
Right. Yeah.
How'd you make that transition? Because, Mike was just on the other side, just talking about, you got to accept the risk, be willing to fail, because that's where you are. I mean, that's where you need to go. You need to run as far, harder, and fast as you can.
So the first piece of advice is before you make the jump, and I'll go back to my very first answer, is you have to have credibility in the marketplace. You can't go out there, start a business and say, oh, well, I'm just the smartest guy in the room and everyone should buy my service because of a reason A, B, and C. I had credibility. What I didn't have was, didn't think about was, what's the risk of failure? And, I would say my brother and Mike and a lot of friends said, okay, Larry, let's put this in perspective. You're a senior executive in the government. You ran the White House. You've managed a portfolio of 360 million square feet, 10,000 buildings. I kind of think you could get a job if this doesn't work out for you, right? So you think that through and you say, okay, what's the worst that could happen? Maybe it doesn't work out this time and I wasn't ready for it. But I always say, if you're going to fail fast, fail forward, but recover quick. You better recover quick and figure out really quickly what worked and what didn't work. I think that's the one thing that I focused on a lot. Failure is not an option. And, Mike, I'm going to keep using the term maverick, and we're going to come back to that with the predictive index. But I think that's the maverick mentality. I am wired in a sense, and Mike knows this, is people like us thrive in the situation where if failure is a possibility, it's going to enable us to work even harder. And I would say that's self-driven. It's self-motivated. You can't teach that. You have to be naturally wired to say, what's my recovery mode? Look, if there were, I would be naive if I told you there were not people that in the industry that intentionally want to, maybe chuckle and say, oh, this guy is crazy. He walked away from a government career. This is going to be fun. Let's watch this thing turn into a nightmare and fail. So when you see it grow, when you get the wins, when you get the ribbons, when you get the growth strategy that you have, there is no better high or fun part of the business than winning. Winning is contagious, and people want to be on winning teams. So I think that part of the feeding the beast of not failing is continuing to win, even if it's a small win. I always said I wasn't always looking for you don't always have to look for the 10, 20, $50 million win. Look for the small nugget, baby step win, scale and grow, figure out where your strategy is. And Mike, you touched on it. is you got to bob and weave in your business too. You got to change your business model. Where we started in 2013 is not inherently where we are today. We have pivoted, bobbed and weaved, and expanded our services. And I know we're going to talk about that maybe in the back end about what the future holds for the building people and how we've grown. But I will say we've been very deliberate about looking at our services and expanding those because you have to adjust to the market. And look, if there's ever a change in the market when you're doing business with fellow government from one administration to the next, you better figure out really quickly what your business model is. Because if you don't, you're just a sitting duck.
Excellent. And circling back to you now, Mike, because obviously you came from a different perspective. How did you deal with failure? And more importantly, how do you now coach and counsel? Well, I'd say more importantly, how do you deal with failure? And what are you telling people today about failure?
Yeah, geez, when I think about failure, it's a lot of this is just philosophically our relationship to that word. What does failure really, what does that really mean to us? And I've always looked at it as a lesson learned, right? When I think back, my most recent failure, I live in Charleston. In 2016, I'd invested in a number of small operations. I had just invested in a golf car warranty business with the main business owner, and I was ready to pour all my blood, sweat, and tears into that business. And about 30 days into the business, he said, "Hey, do you want to buy 2-bar restaurants with me?" And I thought, what a great idea. I'm going to buy not one, but I'm going to buy 2-bar restaurants because after all, I've run businesses before, right? All the stories you hear about the food and beverage businesses is that, the culinary expert is not ready to be, for all the things that come along with business. And I think where I failed in that sense was in two key areas. One, doing due diligence around taking the time to do due diligence on what I was buying. And then number two, getting clear on the business model. Did it support a non-operator owner model? Or I was clear I didn't want to be bartending, staying up late, closing down the bar at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. But what I realized is that option wasn't on the table for me. So when I think about failure, those are some of the key nuggets. And it cost me $200,000 of cash in just a year time frame. So the lesson that I took out of that, and incidentally, I didn't know what I know now about myself, about my behavioral orientation and my risk orientation then. So I think, the lesson out of this, the lesson learned is as an entrepreneur, as a business professional, we talk so much now about developing self-awareness, about really getting in touch with who you are, how you show up for yourself, how you show up for others. I think had I known what I know now about myself, that may have prevented a failure. So I guess my lesson is doing some work to really understand what makes you tick as a business professional, because not all entrepreneurs are wired. And even Larry and I, as quote unquote mavericks, we're not even similar versions of mavericks. So I think really understanding, doing the work is a great lesson that I've learned to say, hey, I might need to slow down, invite someone else to be looking at the details that maybe I'm not naturally going to gravitate toward. So that's just a lesson about failure, that it's going to happen. Just mark it down. You may not know it's coming. You're going to do your best to prevent it, but there is going to be a time when you're going to look back and fail, and you may not, I can look back on it now and clearly define it as failure. I wouldn't have defined it as failure in that moment. I would have defined it as, I'm going to run really fast to try and close on these 2-bar restaurants and transition my license, our liquor license, and establish bank accounts and hire new people. And that, to me, I was succeeding when in reality I was really failing at the moment.
By the way, go ahead, Larry.
There's the component of you will hit forks in the road that inevitably you're going to fail. You have you have two options. You're either going left in the road or right in the road. And those happen in business. And I can tell you, in 8 years, I frequently joke with the team that I know exactly where the forks in the road were. And fortunately, I've made the right decision because it's always ended up making us better. But I look back at those opportunities, those situations where we were at the fork in the road, and I said to myself, what if I didn't make that decision? What if I waffled on that decision, I waited? Or what if I didn't make that strategic hire when I did? What would have happened? And that's how do I take that lesson learned to position to those catastrophic failures? I think the most important thing I do now is when I hit a fork in the road moment and I see that aha, I immediately document it and say, okay, what did I learn from that? And what did I learn? Where else in the business am I vulnerable? Because I did not think this piece through. And how would I even get in this position? So I think that's kind of a little bit of that risk. But the failure, I'm with you, Mike. It's going to happen. Document it, figure it out, and give it a complete scan of your current business state at that point and say, okay, what else is going to be impacted had I not made that decision? So it's a close call situation. You got to make them close calls, not failures. But failures are going to happen. Absolutely going to happen. And look, you just got to minimize them to be small and non-financial related is generally the best way. You can have hiring failures, personnel failures, contract failures, performance failures, but the financial ones are the ones that you say, uh-oh, that hurt.
Well, I do like how both of you, by the way, treated failure as a learning opportunity. Because, like when I fell in my own life, for example, just to reiterate what you're saying, you got to look at it something, you got to take something out of it besides just going and closing the door and closing the shades and everything. You got to move on. So the key thing there is that learning. So I love that aspect of it.
It's okay to cry when you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I guarantee you
it's
that.
Cathartic.
It's cathartic. I tell everyone they say, there's no crying at the building people. No, you can cry. Go back in that back corner and cry because there's some things that really, really hurt. And you go, okay, get over it. But yeah, if you're an entrepreneur and you're in business for yourself, there will be days you will cry. Absolutely.
Excellent. I don't know if this is a good segue or not to my next question. Let's talk about work-life balance because both of you are in long-term relationships. So talk to us a little bit how you're able to manage all this and also how important the spouse is or the family is in helping you to go forward or not to go forward per se. And just to talk a little bit about it. And Larry, we'll stick with you.
Well, I'll say Mike is actually, I readily admit Mike is better at work-life balance. Mike does a great job of pulse checking me, whether it's my personal health, taking care of myself, and balancing it all out and taking a deep breath and stepping back. But I think I will say that when you're in business, and I know Mike would agree with me, and you're in a long-term relationship, and I've been married and with my spouse for 26 years. First off, they're in the business, whether they're in the business or not, they're in the business because they are your sounding board. They are your voice of reason. They're also your gut check. And they're the one person who will tell you you're absolutely insane and you're wrong when you don't want to hear that you're wrong, right? All you wanted was someone to say, oh, yes, honey, you're right. And that's the worst thing in the world. So I am fortunate enough that, when I started the business, and I'll never forget this, and I tell this story to our employees even recently at our all hands meeting recently, I said, I am blessed that in 2013, when I was getting ready to make that leap, the one piece of comment that struck a chord with me was my wife said, I'd rather be poor and you happy than you miserable in doing this. So let's figure out a way to do it, make the jump, we'll make something work. And when you have that kind of base and support at the startup phase of 2013, when I started building people, man, that's huge. So you never forget that, right? In balancing stress and work-life balance, I will say this. I don't, it's funny because I always say when someone says, man, you work a lot. Okay, well, I say, well, first of all, you call it work. I wake up and I follow my passion. So I happen to get paid to follow my passion, and this is my passion. This is what I am made for now. And I didn't know what I didn't know then. But so I don't call it work. This is just, I get up every day and we play a game of chess essentially. And the question is, how do you win? How do you lose? How do you bob it, pivot, and weave? In terms of I'd say the number one thing that I got advice, not just from Mike recently, but another CEO told me, hey, he asked me the question, okay, Larry, you're growing like crazy. We had just hit Inc. 5000 for the first time. He said, you were off to the races. He said, what is the one thing that is your, 800-pound gorilla. It's the frog on your table every single day that's not working. And I said, my health. I said, I'm not taking care of myself. I was eating bad. I wasn't, I wasn't getting enough sleep. My sleep patterns were atrocious. And he said, well, that's great that you can acknowledge that. And he said, so either you have two options. Either you can do something about it, or you can keep going the way you're going and you're going to die early and everyone's going to enjoy all the hard work that you did. Someone else is going to enjoy that. So he said, but the other perspective is that when you're a CEO and an owner of a business, it is your personal responsibility to take care of your health, because the entire workforce is counting on you. And you don't realize that. And I don't think I really had that epiphany till about year 4, when I realized, hey, I gotta calibrate. I gotta focus on me. I gotta make sure I'm taking care of myself, because you're not going to do a bit of good if you're dead and in the ground as a CEO of a company if you're not here. So I really focused a lot of my health starting in 2017. I focused on eating right, dieting, exercise, really calibrating and taking care of myself. My self-awareness of my work-life balance and stress level now is way off the charts compared to where I was even 3 years ago. Now I'm very, very self-aware. And then Mike does prod me every once in a while that he got more workouts than me this week.
True.
So that's Mike. Mike's better at it than I am.
Well, listen, I mean, Clay, I could tell one story. I think balance is the balance really is an acknowledging, if you are in a relationship, if you're married, if you have a significant other that's coming along for the ride as part of entrepreneurship, that's really where the balancing comes. And I think where I may have struggled to, when I think back to when I owned my wireless construction company, I had made a choice. We started the business in California. I moved my family back to the East Coast, to the Northern Virginia area. And I was actually on a plane for about 6 or 7 years. I was on a plane where there was probably about a 6 or 7 year period where I was not on one coast to the other for more than about 7 to 10 days. So my body knew no time zone. And that really took a toll on my wife, who was, in my mind, I was moving back. We had just had our first daughter, and I wanted our friends and family on the East Coast to play a part in their life. And what I didn't see was that I was going to be taking my own time away from spending time with my daughter. So, when I look back, that was a choice. That was one of those forks in the road that I made that, geez, and I still to this day have to acknowledge the role that my wife played in balancing out, being that counterbalance to enabling me to do what I did in building my organization. So to Larry's point, the diet, the health, the exercise, I do CrossFit at least 4, sometimes 5 times a week. We moved from the Northern Virginia area 6 years ago down to Charleston just to kind of completely change up life. We're going to church. There's our frame of reference for what's important is different. And I would say that, business is not the cake, where it's, it's part of the, it's not the whole layer of cake. It's a pretty big part. I enjoy my cake, but that balance, if you're looking for that seesaw, if you're approaching it from a balance perspective, I don't know that anybody does it really well, does that balancing act. I think it's really just an acknowledgement of the areas of your life that need attention. So, when you're on the plane, cabin loses pressure, put your mask on first. So to Larry's point, taking care of yourself. I knew I had 110 employees. I had 110 mouths to feed, and all the folks that were associated, there's probably 300-400 lives that were counting on our ability to grow the business. And same with Larry. He's got hundreds of employees, hundreds of folks that are relying on him. So I can say taking care of our, somebody said you only live once. And I guess the point is you only die once. You get every day, you get a chance to live. So I would say really focusing on, paying attention to your health. Surround yourself, balancing out who you're listening, who you're learning from. Get yourself in a CEO, business entrepreneur, immerse yourself in learning from others, maybe not even in your industry, but just being in that conversation of business. And that was one of the ways that really helped me develop as a leader, handle the stress, learn lessons, prevent myself from making other, valuable mistakes, and really give me that balance.
Yeah.
Excellent answer. And I also like the way you gave your wife a lot of credit there. So both of
Oh,
you guys, nice
100%.
job
If
there.
you are starting
Make
a
sure you give 'em a
business,
shout out.
strap in. Your husband or wife or significant other is absolutely going to be your business partner, 100%.
Yeah, 1,000%. And if you think that you know it all, you're wrong. You don't.
Yes. Yeah, I was gonna say my wife is very good about keeping me humble, so I appreciate that comment too. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
kind of moving on to some of the questions that some of the top questions that the MBA students sent in. This question is for Mike. And so to give you guys, this gentleman's name is Caden Ryan. He actually would like to do some work, or has done work with like KPMG and some other places, but would probably like to do some more of that. So his is a consultant question. And he goes, as a business consultant coming in and dealing with large companies and large egos, this is the question. What type of strategy do you use to persuade these CEOs to believe in you and the strategy that you are recommending at the time? And what happens if the client disagrees with you?
Yeah, good. So there's kind of like two or three little nuggets hidden in there. The first thing I'll say is, if you're trying to persuade a CEO, if you're trying to sell them on something, good luck. Let me know how that works out for you. I think when I think about trying to make a difference for an organization, it really starts with, and we've kind of talked a little bit about this, but doing a little work to see and really understand what makes you tick and how you show up for others. If you can practice and really get in touch with what makes you tick first, that's going to help you be a better listener, understand when, hey, for me as a big picture idea brainstorming guy, I have to be aware when I'm in a room where I'm not the focal point, where I'm not talking, where I'm not just providing ideas. I know that when I come up with a plan, I'm going to need to pay particular attention to the execution of that plan that I'm recommending. So I think the lesson is really, one, do a little work to develop your self-awareness, really understand how you're showing up as a consultant. And really the best consultants aren't really paid to give advice. They're really paid to listen. The folks that listen the best, that hear things that maybe that CEO, that client is saying, but they don't understand. The art of listening is something that from a sales perspective, from a consulting perspective, it's so hard to, we all want to just throw up on the other person with all our thoughts and ideas. We're in a hurry to solve. And I think even in marriage, right? Developing that ability to listen will really serve you in your ability to share thoughts, ideas, because sometimes a CEO, sometimes your client is just looking for you to listen, not to solve. So trying to sell somebody on your idea, that that has its place, but I would argue that that's not a long-term strategy for being a successful consultant. If that's if that's what you want to be. I see that Caden is in accounting, and Caden, happy to have a conversation with you offline about your very behavioral orientation using the predictive index.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. And I love the part about listening for that.
If I could add to
Please.
Mike, when Mike and I got reconnected, him with People Surge and the building people, I had to listen to what Mike was saying. I didn't have to, I chose to. But what I got out of it on the other end of listening to Mike as a CEO, of course, Mike's coming in to sell me something. was the fact that I needed that sounding board. I need someone who had been there, done that. And that's one thing that as a CEO, it is lonely at the top. And there is a huge value, just to reverse engineer the question, is we need people like Mike out there in the industry to have that sounding board. Because if you're building your leadership team, when you're starting a business and you're starting to build your infrastructure and your leadership team, you also know that anyone internally at times, sometimes people give you advice that is self-serving. It's nice to get an outsider's perspective and be a pulse check. And, people like Mike come in and they don't tell you what you want to hear. They tell you what you need to hear. And you, as a CEO, it's really important for you to be so self-aware that you give people permission, like Mike or the consultants out there. You say, hey, I hired you, or I'm going to hire you to help me. Don't tell me what I want to hear. Tell me what I need to hear. And that's the one thing that's been great value. Now, it's different because I have a friendship and personal trust with Mike. But I think with any consultant, don't hire a consultant if you don't want to listen. Don't hire a consultant if you're going to tell them what you want the outcome to be. You can tell them what your expectations are, or what you want or need, or what you think you need, but it's their job to help guide you there too. So sometimes that's not always in the same roadmap of what you want as a CEO either.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I know that, having done some consulting myself, that you can, sometimes they don't want to hear. They just want you to basically advocate for what they want to choose to do anyway, versus that open air, which once again is why you guys are so successful. And so, Larry, this one's come back to you. This is more of a commercial real estate type question from Tressa Presley McLeod here, also one of our wonderful MBA students. She goes, basically, how do you foresee the dynamic of your building business to change amid the COVID-19 pandemic, when there have been significant changes to the business environment, specifically a shift towards smaller workspaces and work from home opportunities?
Great question. And it's interesting. I'm actually writing an article about this very, very topic right now for a couple reasons. About 5 years ago, I wrote an article called The Human Element. It was published. And we always said everything was about people when it came to technology buildings and leveraging the workspace and transforming workplaces. Interestingly enough, now fast forward, if we thought we had a people problem then, we certainly have a people problem now, because everybody's working at home. And let's be real, I can't think of any of us we're all want to get back to normalcy, right? We want normalcy. We want to be able to go out and do things socially. But when it comes to our commute and having those dreaded commutes back to the office, full time in the office, and not have that flexibility that now we're all used to, we're going to have a people problem. So that's another longer discussion, maybe part 2 for another class, especially leveraging the information around PI. But when you look at the COVID pandemic and the impact of workplace, so I do think we do have a real estate problem, and we have a finally recognition of those who were against teleworking, work at home functionality, that, you have to be in the office. I will tell you, the good, bad, and the ugly is, I still feel like there is a significant component of strategic work and cultural team building that has to happen in the office environment. But the question is, do you need that large footprint? One thing with us in our business model, we are not brokers. We've never been in the broker real estate space, and that was by design when we started in 2013. We were of the mindset of the one who dies with the most space is not going to win, right? We're about the one who has the most efficient workspace, workplace, and workplace culture. They win. So we've always been focused on smaller workspaces. What COVID-19 has done is really change the dynamic of, okay, so what is the right balance of co-working space? You just can't. We saw major initiatives across the federal government in particular, where they did the federal freeze the footprint. And they said, we're going to cut and consolidate 30% of our real estate. So they got out of that leased space and went into federally owned space. But when they went into that federally owned space, they created benching work styles. And for those of you who don't know what benching is literally you put up a picnic table, that long table, and you sit there, and it's like sitting at a computer, which feels like a trough. And it's not very fun to work at. And you're sitting there and with headphones like Mike has on, but you're literally about 2 feet away from your colleague, and you're whispering, but you're not really inclined to have conversations because everybody's heads down. There's a job and a function who can function like that, but that is not going to build workplace camaraderie. That's kind of not going to build the workplace of the future. You're not going to have a lot of collaboration of your employees when you have that kind of workplace setup. So the real question is, between social distancing and changing work styles and the real estate mentality, I think the biggest thing we're going to focus on with reentry strategies, as we're calling them. And that is the biggest component. We now have a reentry strategy that has been paramount to our business today. So we are working with a lot of federal agencies. I can't name who those are for obvious reasons. We are working with some of the top agencies that are both in the health industry of federal government, the watchdog and the big industry, big brother, and policy-driven agencies who are trying to figure out, okay, what do we want to mandate in this reentry back to work? Well, when our phone rang and said, so, hey, what's your offering? What can you do? And they said, we don't even know where to begin. We said, all right, well, there's three components. There's the entire component of the healthy workspace that we got to deal with, right? The air quality has to be good when people come back, to social distancing of the real estate footprint. But everyone was focused on technology, information, and the connectivity of their employees when they came back to work. And the reality is nobody was talking about people. And we said, folks, we have a people problem. You got to break the norm. So I think where we're really going to see the market change is more focus on people. And what we are banking on, quite frankly, is that we know that the complexity of bringing people back to work is not just start coming back to work Tuesday through Thursday. There's going to be a strategic component for how do we know how people are wired? What are their needs? What are their requirements? What are their work styles? And how do we really dig into what do the employees need in their behaviors and how they're wired for success? Because you coming back to work is just going to be this mass frustration for, I think, a lot of people, given the fact that they've had a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, Clay, we're going to see a lot of the work that we're going to be doing around gathering data around behavioral assessments from maybe an organization of maybe 1,000 employees, and looking at trends to say, okay, this group of people here in this department would tend to enjoy, quote unquote, or be energized by working from home, and this group would tend to be energized or enjoy being in person, benefiting from that interpersonal interaction, which incidentally, the greatest indicator of longevity of life for us as human beings is human interaction, more than diet, more than exercise. So that component of understanding that dynamic, that's probably been the two things. One is that human interaction. Am I energized by being around people? And then the second component is change. What's my relationship to changing conditions? And if we think about the past year, change has really been the norm. And those folks that have an aversion to change, they typically want to know the why. Why are we doing this? What's the plan? Why are we now? Last week we were on this Zoom call. Next week we're going to be doing business this way. So all of those, this is the human element that Larry's talking about, that this is not just about, hey, we had 50 million square feet, let's cut it down to 40 million, right? Let's cut it by 20% or whatever the figure was. There really is going to be some science and art behind knowing who really should we be bringing back into the office using science and data around behavioral norms.
Okay, excellent. And also I want to, because I know many of you, both of you should say, have things upcoming here shortly. So I'm going to kind of segue here to Triss's last question, and then that will allow you to segue into what we talked about the top offline in terms of, so people surge and the PI. You keep talking about this thing called the PI.
Yep.
What is the PI, and how is the PI and people surge going to relate to the building people?
Yeah, good question. So almost 3 years ago, I've been a certified partner of the Predictive Index. I had been advising businesses for a number of years, and in the consulting world, especially when you're first starting out, if you've got yourself and a business partner or two, we were all former CEOs and business owners, which is really fantastic. We have a lot of experience to lend. But there was something missing, and the sales cycle of getting a client to trust you because you've got that experience is different from when you can actually show them some science and data and some real technology to complement our experience. So it was a game changer for us in terms of our business model to now have some software and technology that we can sell. And incidentally, this software is really a platform that allows us to enable our clients to really develop that people strategy and really see whether or not their people strategy is aligned with their business strategy. Because a lot of times, and we're having this conversation around behavioral norms, and the predictive index, one of their foundational tools is a behavioral assessment that allows us to quickly understand within 5 to 6 minutes and 2 questions to understand the behavioral orientation of a particular individual. So that software, that technology has been a game changer in my ability to consult with, advise my clients. And really, as we think about the business model, Larry and I are about to enter into a formal business relationship where he will acquire our business and effectively become a predictive index certified partner, which we're really seeing this as really bringing some credibility to that third leg of his trifecta of technology, buildings, and people. Now we'll be able to go into that organization of 2, 3, 4, 500, even 1,000 people, do behavioral assessments, do some analytics behind the data to say, okay, this part of your workforce is going to be okay returning to the workplace. This part of the workforce maybe would prefer to work from home. So is there an arrangement? Is this dynamic? Do we have people in the right roles? What are the strategic initiatives that this particular team is about to go set out on? So that's the fun work that we're really getting to do. So it's not all about us. It's really about the science, the data, which no matter what you're doing as an entrepreneur, you're going to be looking at facts, data, information, analytics of some sort to make critical business decisions as we think about the future.
Yeah, it's funny, Clay, and Mike, I'm glad you told the story about the acquisition and how we're joining forces to that third leg. And one of the big pieces to that, if it logically makes sense. Remember, I started in the beginning of the conversation that you had to have credibility to sell something. One of the things that drove that decision for Mike's to acquire and partner with Mike longer term and integrate the firms was quite simply that we were using PI internally in our hiring practice, our scientific approach to talent optimization. Some of our customers started to ask us, hey, what's your secret sauce? You've transformed some of the workforce that we've seen on site here. We see it on our end. We see the results. What are you guys doing different? There's something going on. And we started sharing our case study stories to our customers. And that's when, quite frankly, I said, we now have credibility. We've done it. We've modeled the behavior. Now let's try to sell it and turn it into a solution for our customers. So it makes sense. Like the building people, we've always said, obviously we're technology buildings and people, and we're delivering the future of facilities today, right? We're moving the needle on the business of facilities and real estate market. But the reality is we're building people. And that's when we realized that we were making a transformational change with our workforce internally that our customers needed to benefit from. And quite frankly, it just made perfect sense for us since we had, I don't want to say just the secret sauce, but an ability to speak candidly about, hey, this is what we do for a living. We know this business so well. We've modeled it, and now we see the benefits that our customers can yield from it. So why not share that? So we're excited about what the future holds. It's an exciting time for us, and we'll be making a lot of public announcements and some webinars here soon to expand on that.
Yeah, brilliant. Congratulations on the merger acquisition. Everyone's described right there. That's brilliant news there. Can you talk a little bit more also, and then this will be our my closing question to both of you. In terms of growth, Larry, you're Inc. 5000, 3 years, just by the law of numbers. It's going to be hard to keep being on that list. Yeah. So tell us about how the growth.
Well, first and foremost, we just had a massive offsite with our entire team, and the foundational message we started with was, what got us here won't get us there. It's kind of crazy to think that we went from 0 to $33 million firm and close to $35 million firm in not even 8 years, 7.5 years, right? That's awesome. But let's just be real. If you're trying to get to 50 million, 75 million, 100 million, and that's what we want to do and try to achieve, you can't keep doing the same thing and expect the same results. You just don't. You don't start growing at 180 to 200% every year. We are still in growth mode. We're very fortunate that, but if we're going to see some of that growth slow, the goal here is really to say, okay, what are we doing to make sure our market offerings are positioning us to be competitive in the market? because as you grow, you do start to compete with larger firms that have better infrastructure than you, better marketing capability than you, heavier hitters, right? As a small business, we're not loaded with a bunch of, we don't have 15, 20 executives running sales, capture, business development, and we don't have regional vice presidents across the nation building large term relationships. We got to scratch and claw to get there. So we have got to focus on how do we hold on to our organic growth. Quite frankly, you got to hold on to the organic growth. You got to be strategic. You got to keep delivering great service. One of the things we focused on quite a bit in the last 3 years is our quality control. We are ISO 9000 certified, 9001 certified, 14001 certified. I think the focus on quality, we have a quality control manager. It is her only job to look at every single one of our performance contracts and make sure we're paying attention to all the little details about how we're performing our services. We now do performance management meetings quarterly to make sure that not only are they financially profitable, but making sure that our organizations and our leaders are delivering the great service that we expect at a high quality. You can grow really quick and deliver really crappy service, and you will tank very quickly. We're focused on quality right now, so that might slow our growth a little bit, but I think it positions us to make sure we're ready for the next big push. We're also bringing on top talent too. I think we're building our leadership team. We've made major investments in our leadership to get to the point where we can have, instrumental people like Mike, who are credible people in the marketplace that can make a difference. So we're excited that when you build those leadership qualities and have those leaders join your team, they think differently. They add different qualities to the growth strategy as well. So I'm excited about it. I think we are going to grow. I do think we'll make the Inc. 5000 list again this year. I can't promise we'll make the 500, but look, growth is growth. I'll take it any way you can. We just got to keep doing great work and surround ourselves with the message of being a people first company and focusing on our organization, our culture has been foundational. And I gotta give our team kudos. Clay, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that we just got top places in the U.S. to work to, a brand new award for our entire team for their hard work. So we're really proud of that as well. So it's growing and being good at what you do and building a workforce that's happy about it.
That's fantastic. Congratulations on that, by the way. That is a big deal. Mike, any other comments for us here at the end?
No, I think, we're just thinking about the future of the building people and PeopleServe, just really just that focus on developing the leadership. Larry said it. I think the focus this year is really bringing on the horsepower to strap on to that rocket, right? Larry was the rocket man that got him to 35 million, right? Now we need, additional rocket boosters to get on that rocket to break through the stratosphere to really get out in orbit. And that's where guys like myself and his new chief growth officer and new CFO, expanding the leadership capabilities to really have that leadership team will now map to the growth plan for the business.
Brilliant. I love the metaphor too there. So once again, great job, gentlemen. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us. And once again, just thank you and hotty toddy.
Hotty toddy.
Thanks so much, Clay.
All right.